access that some people need to their providers, which is an important thing if you're getting treatment for, I'm just going to make up some things like cancer or diabetes, you know, some major drugs, or Crohn's disease, certain things that you look at. Also, the PPO had a better drug formulary than the HMO plans did. So some people picked that PPO for having that. The PPO was the only one in Texas that was offered that allowed people access all throughout the state into many what you would call super facilities if you had certain conditions like heart, Baylor, MD Anderson, UT Southwestern for cancer. So even if you were in Abilene or Lubbock, you had access to them in network. Changing to this HMO platform removes that ability for people to move around and have that type of access. There are some PPO plans that are available, but basically they're off exchange only. On exchange, you can find HMOs and some EPOs, which is a limited PPO network, a smaller PPO network, more related to the particular area. And so people that in particular were getting a premium tax credit and had the Blue Choice PPO and maybe had certain providers like at UT Southwestern, Texas Oncology, the only way they will get to those providers is to get a plan off exchange, which means losing their tax credit, or they may have to make the unfortunate choice, because it's all they can afford, is to keep their tax credit and pick out of the HMO plans that are available the one that might best fit their needs and their providers that are near them.
Wow. So, you know, that is, and we're going to kind of circle back to this topic at the very end about, you know, how do you make this decision, and what are some of your other options if, you know, if your providers are important to you and it looks like you may be losing your provider through your current plan. You know, I know you mentioned, Susan, that a lot of the PPO plans that do still exist are only going to be available off the network or outside of the marketplace. One that it looks like will be available through the marketplace is the Baylor Scott and White. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
The other one that's off marketplace will be United Healthcare's. It's not available. Oh, you got it.
so yeah.
No, I'm not up to your speed yet.
Yeah, we didn't rehearse this a whole lot. So yeah, the you know, the nice thing is there are still some PPO options out there. The negative thing, obviously, is that, you know, Blue Cross is the biggest individual insurance company, individual carrier in the state, and with them making this decision, it certainly does disrupt things for some people. So the network and the providers that are in the HMO or the PPO network, obviously that is in itself important, but I think another consideration as people are choosing between a PPO and an HMO is that the prescriptions are not always the same on these different networks. And I know we were talking about this the other day, Susan, and what you were saying is that the with some of the new plans, what we're seeing is not just the typical 3-tier formulary that we've seen in the past. What we're actually seeing is maybe a preferred generic at a you know, copayment, and maybe a preferred brand name at a you know, higher copayment, but then some additional tiers where you pay a co-insurance percentage, so you're paying a percentage of the bill rather than a set dollar amount, which is, you know, a little bit different than the way it's been done in the past. So that's obviously an issue. The other thing is, and this I believe is certainly applicable to Blue Cross, Susan. I don't know if it's with other carriers as well, but Blue Cross is switching to where now they're going to have preferred and non-preferred pharmacies as well in their network with, I guess, different cost sharing.
That's correct. It'd be a lower copay if you go to the preferred pharmacy, higher copay, non-preferred pharmacy. If you're on an HSA compatible plan, it would probably be a slightly higher cost than the preferred pharmacy because they've negotiated a lower rate with the preferred pharmacy.
Exactly. And one of the other big differences, and this is why it's really going to be important for people who are currently on say a Blue Cross PPO, and now they're being switched over, mapped to a HMO plan if they choose to stay with Blue Cross. Obviously, the doctors are important. You might find that your providers do participate in the Blue Cross HMO network, but it's still important when you're making your decision to look at the formulary, because the HMO formulary and the PPO formulary is not the same. In fact, I believe Blue Cross is refiling a lot of their plans because of some of the changes they've made to their formulary. Is that correct?
That's correct. Even their HMO plans, only one of them will be renewing. They'll have new HMO plans because of this new prescription tier. They're basically going to a generic plus. So if you use a brand when there's a generic available, you're sort of punished by paying the difference between the two besides the copay. Unless you're on an HSA, then you're just still paying just the cost of the prescription.
And one of the things that that I know that you've mentioned is that while it might seem that it makes sense to do a whole lot of shopping, between the different insurance companies to find out on the formulary, which one is going to work better for you. I believe you said that some of those tend to be in step with how they would rate the drugs, but that those that offer an HMO and a PPO network, that within an insurance company, when you're comparing between the different networks, that's where you really do need to compare the formularies and see how your drugs are going to be treated on each one. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Yeah, that is true. Because generally, most of them all have the same idea, what's a brand, what's a preferred brand, because when you look at all the large carriers, they all have the same negotiation ability with the different pharmaceuticals, and that's where you get your preferred brand or non-preferred brand, and also sometimes has to do with efficacy, but they definitely all want to steer people to generics when it's possible, and to what they call their preferred brand over non-preferred brands, mainly due to cost, but sometimes it is efficacy. You can sometimes get exceptions, but your physician has to file for the exception with the carrier that you are currently enrolled with. You can't find out about exceptions until after you're enrolled.
Yeah, so you can't really do the research ahead of time because it's something where when you're already a member, then they would ask for the exception.
And that UHC plan is a separate it's a separate $500 deductible from the deductible that's part of the medical plan. So your drugs go to that first before you get a copay on their particular PPO plans.
Yeah, so that's a good reason, to as you're comparing plans, you do need to look at how your drugs are treated, as far as, what are the co-payments for the various ones, but also, like we were saying, compare between the networks and look at what formulary is used, because it's not going to be the same across networks, and then look at other weird things that the insurance companies are doing, really to keep costs down. So sometimes what you will see is like what United Healthcare is doing now, where there's an upfront deductible that is separate from the insurance company or insurance plan deductible that applies just to prescriptions. Sometimes you might have a plan that is HSA compatible, and after the deductible has been met, that's when the co-payments would kick in on prescriptions instead of co-insurance percentage, or instead of it being covered at 100%. So there are a lot of differences now in how the insurance companies treat the drugs, but the reality is that when you put all of that together, it becomes more of a reason really to look at an HSA compatible plan. You know, a lot of people in the past, the reason that they purchased a plan that had those upfront co-payments is they knew that they had a monthly medication or even multiple medications that they take on a monthly basis, and they relied on those first dollar co-payments. But you know, if you throw an upfront deductible in front of the prescriptions, you know, where you have to pay $500 before they're going to be covered, or if more of your drugs are being moved to higher co-payment tiers, or even you're having to pay a percentage of the bill, then what ends up happening is you're paying extra premium for a copayment, but you're not really getting the benefit of that copayment. So with an HSA compatible plan, for anybody who isn't yet on one, the way that an HSA works is everything's going to be subject to the deductible. So preventive care would be covered up front at with no cost sharing, but any of the other services, doctors, hospitals, and even prescriptions, they're not going to be covered or paid for by the insurance company until you've met the minimum deductible on the plan. After that, though, then you pay a percentage of the bill. You pay the co-insurance until your out-of-pocket limit is met. On any of the plans, the nice thing is the cost of the prescriptions does count toward the out-of-pocket limit, and you do still get the insurance company's negotiated rate. So they have some bulk buying power and negotiating power with the different pharmacies, and so you get quite a bit of a discount just from being on the health plan, and then that amount will count toward your out-of-pocket limit. So anything you want to add on HSAs? I know you're a big fan of those, Susan.
Well, I'm a big fan mainly because they're lower premium, and I'd rather see people put the dollars into their health savings account and pay for their expenses with pre-tax dollars rather than post-tax dollars. And when they have a healthy year, the amount that they put in, if they haven't spent it, rolls over year after year. So when you pay it in premium, you've kissed it goodbye for sure. And then if you're not really utilizing it, or when I look at some of these benefits now, like with the RX and a percentage instead of a true copay, I don't think I'm getting my bang for my buck.
Yeah, and I definitely would agree with that. I think, you know, as we're seeing out of pockets go up and then the prescription cost sharing go up, it just kind of makes it almost more of a no-brainer to go with an HSA and take advantage of the tax savings. One last important point on.
Except the exception to that, Eric, would be if somebody's writing a policy for a child because the child doesn't have tax returns, then that child we would want on a copay plan.
Very good point. Yeah, especially if it's
that's the one true exception to that.
Very good point. One final point on HSAs. I know, again, many of you on the call have an HSA plan, but for those of you that don't, and even those that do, it is important to know that while you do pay the contracted price until your deductible's met on an HSA qualified plan, you pay that for doctor visits and prescriptions and so forth. The reality is that contracted price isn't the same at every provider. So from one doctor to another, one hospital to another for different procedures, the insurance companies have different negotiated rates with those providers. And the same thing is true of prescription drugs. They might have different contracted rates for your prescription at different pharmacies. And the problem is when you walk in, it's not like going into McDonald's where they have a board up there that has all the prices, what are your options and your prices. Sometimes you have to ask and get them to run it through and compare. There aren't a ton of great transparency tools out there that really let you see those prices, but it certainly is worth shopping around if you're paying the contracted price just to see if you can find a lower cost option.
At least when I look at Blue Cross, they say, here's our preferred pharmacies. Now, this wouldn't be true for all carriers, but when they say CVS, Walmart, Costco, HEB, and then there's what's called some sort of independent retail pharmacy grouping, that sort of tells me that those probably have the cheaper price than the others. Now, it might be more convenient to go to Target or something, but since they're not in the preferred pharmacy network, that just is a hint to me that they're probably not the one with the cheapest price.
Agreed. So how do you actually search for providers? Well, one thing, if you've been to the JME website lately, it's jmeinsurance.com. If you have been there lately, then you've probably noticed that we have updated the website. It is still a work in progress, but we've made quite a bit of progress. And for open enrollment, we've done a couple of things. One is right on the very front page. We've put in some quick links up at the top of the home page to make it easy for you, but we've also created an open enrollment page of the website. So you can go there and either click on the banner at the top or click on the button that says open enrollment, and you'll find some information, some of the same information we're talking about in this session. We will have a link to this presentation. We are recording it, so we'll have a link to it. If you want to go back and watch it again, you certainly can. That'll be on that page as well. But we also have a way to search for providers. So you'll see this in about 3 different places on the website, where there will be a box with the different insurance company names and where it says you can get a quote or sign up for coverage. Those quotes are not going to be available. The quoting function is not available with most of them until November the 1st. But you can go ahead now and check the provider network. So what you do is you click on the button that says check provider network, or the link that says check provider network, and it's going to open up in a separate window a page that looks like this, where it will explain which networks are available and whether they're available on exchange or off exchange. So you can click there and search for your provider, and look for your favorite hospitals, look for any specialists or primary doctors if you don't want to give those up. I think it's a good idea to go ahead and get started on that process. There is a tool that JME has that will allow us to do some comparisons between networks, but it's not available yet, and there's a huge volume of calls and emails at this time of the year. So I think at the very least, your agent's going to need your help doing sort of the preliminary work on the provider search. And Susan, I'll let you elaborate on that.
So particularly like on the PPO, you're looking at either Scott and White or United Healthcare or Humana. Right now you can look at Scott and White, and the provider network is pretty accurate. Plus you might even know that you're going to providers that are in the Baylor Scott and White network, because it's large throughout the Metroplex. This is mainly throughout the Metroplex and down the south of 35. So it's to me, it's one of the great PPO options, because if you can find providers in there that you're willing to work with, I think it's probably going to be the lowest cost of the PPOs, just as a guess. I haven't seen the rates yet. And easy movement among all the doctors there. And there's facilities in Dallas, Fort Worth, Denton, Rockwall, and then ongoing south, all the way to Temple, and even just north of Austin. Then there's United Healthcare. However, right now, and you can look up their PPO network. They have the biggest PPO network, but I'm going to guess, based on where they've been and what their rate filing was, that they will be the highest cost. But if you're like my husband and myself and go to UT Southwestern, or like the Presby THR system, that's probably the only place you're going to find those providers. Those rates don't quote yet. They quote what they call their Compass network, which is on exchange. They're quoting that one, but it is a very, very narrow EPO network, and I don't recommend it, and has some other glitches to it. It would only be maybe a consideration if somebody needs a premium tax credit. Then the other PPO is the one plan with Humana. They generally have a pretty good network. They have a great network if you're like in Austin, San Antonio, and Houston. It is an HSA, and like Eric and I were saying, the HSA is a good option, and so that one's got potential, but once again, it's only off exchange. I just got off the phone a little bit ago with Blue Cross, and they told me that their Blue Advantage HMO network will not be fully updated and loaded until November 1st. They're waiting for the last minute to make sure they get all the doctors that they've recently contracted. So you can check now, but it might still get changed later on, but I'm not expecting huge amount of changes between now and then.
Got it. You know what this kind of sounds like is, when there's a big storm or hurricane coming, and hearing the weather people and they're getting the most recent updates. That I know every time I talk to you, that's kind of the way it sounds, because something has changed. You have some breaking news, and I think that's going to continue that way right up until November the 1st. This is the time of the year where there's constant change. So,
Yeah.
at any point in time.
I know, but our clients can't help us. We know the details about the plans and things and can talk to them, and many of them we know personally what types of things they do, but not always all the details. So when we do talk to them, we want to hear their concerns, what they do, how they use their insurance. But if they can do some of the provider lookup for us and narrow that down, that'll help us so we can assist everybody. And then if we have to, we can use this other tool after November the 1st.
Excellent. Okay, so the quoting, obviously we said a couple of times that while there's some rates that are up there already, for the most part, it'll be November the 1st before we can quote for January the 1st. I know that, right now some of the carriers will let you quote on exchange but not off exchange, but the healthcare.gov site isn't actually letting you quote the on exchange site. And actually most of JME's clients purchase coverage off of the exchange. And so really with the rates, hold off for another week and a half, and we'll it'll be a whole lot better then. I know, Susan, you said you've been trying to kind of get a feel for who's running the best on the rates, but without seeing all of them, we don't yet know. Right.
Best, but I can see Blue Cross's rates now, and that button on our website that says quote and apply Blue Cross. Now you can't apply yet, but you can certainly run quotes to see. Of course, the only thing you'll see is the HMO and HMO Plus. Now, if you've been on the PPO, which most of our clients have been, although there's some that have been on the HMO, if they've been on the HMO, they'll see a slight increase. If they've been on the PPO, they would see that the plans would probably cost close to what they are currently paying or slightly less. But of course, it's a smaller network. So, and the Plus plan, and they haven't given me all the details yet, is basically the same HMO Blue Advantage plan in network. It just provides some out-of-network coverage. However, I'm not sure how much it really provides. I haven't seen the deductible. If it's double the in-network deductible, and then they say they pay 50% of the Medicare rate after the deductible's met, and there's no cap to the out-of-pocket, I basically would tell you might as well not have out-of-network coverage. Even like United Healthcare's PPO that's off exchange, it has no out-of-network coverage. So there's a lot of little nuances with this, but when you look at this, people also have to pick a plan that they can afford and sustain and pay the premiums on for the year. So if mainly your hospitals and providers are in one, but maybe one or two doctors are not, you may want to pick one of the networks that's lower in cost and pay just out of pocket for the one or two times you see a particular physician, unless it's a very critical physician to you, like somebody at UT Southwestern. If they were doing some cancer follow-up or transplant follow-up, that would be a big consideration then of what network to choose.
Yeah, and one of the problems with this, and there's no easy way to say it. I mean, it's a tough decision for people because the problem is if you're on a on a PPO network now, and you see that your network or your formulary is changing, obviously, one of the things we can do is shop around for you and see if we can find you another plan that is going to have your doctor and go, have your drugs, covered on the formulary. The problem is a lot of those plans, because there aren't a whole lot of them, the cost may be, a little too high. If you have a PPO and you're purchasing coverage through the marketplace and getting a subsidy, well, it might be that the reason you're on a PPO is that you have an ongoing medical condition. And, if that's the case, you may not be, willing to or able to change providers. And so, the problem there is now you're almost in that position where you're choosing between the financial assistance, the subsidy that's available through the marketplace, or the providers that you need, which you may only be able to get outside of the marketplace. And so, so that's really, I think, where the challenge is. It's just, they've narrowed it down. Doesn't mean everybody's doctor is going away. We're not trying to scare people. We just kind of want to prepare you just in case, in case your doctors aren't in there. If you're getting a subsidy, that's one of the things you're going to have to weigh is how important are the providers versus how important is the subsidy if you can't find the providers in any of the networks through the marketplace. So time frames. The quotes, again, November the 1st. You can start looking at providers now with most of the insurance companies. If you submit an application by November the 15th, or you go to make a change by November 15th, that should be effective for a January 1st effective date. Otherwise, between the middle of December and the middle of January, you're looking at a February 1st effective date, and then middle of January to the end of January, you're looking at a March 1st. Please don't wait until then. Most of you would want your change to take effect for January the 1st. So that doesn't mean everybody should pick up the phone and call the JME office the first week of November. Just realize it's the busy time of the year, and we're still figuring some of this out. But at the same time, don't delay. Don't wait till December 31st or something, because you're already too late for January 1st. Our advice really is, if you do some, you do your due diligence on this, and you do find that you are going to need to change to a different carrier. Maybe, for instance, you're going to be changing from Blue Cross to Scott and White because you need certain providers and they're in the Baylor Scott and White network, but not in the Blue Cross HMO network anymore. If you're going to do that, or I'm sorry, let me actually back up. If you see that you're going to change to a different carrier and it's going to result in you having to change to different plan providers, that's what I should have said. If you're going to have to change to different providers, then you want to start looking to make that move early. If you know you're going to have to switch to a different doctor, maybe talk to your current doctor and see, who they could recommend that is part of the Baylor Scott and White network. Susan, you can probably say that a little more eloquently than I can, but any advice you'd want to give people on switching doctors or switching plans?
No, so like if somebody, I'm just going to make up something, is doing something like some cancer treatment at UT Southwestern, and they look at the rates and they can't afford the UHC PPO, but the Baylor Scott and White has plenty of providers that can provide that same service, cancer treatment, at UT Southwestern. I find most doctors are very reasonable. If you say, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to change plans due to cost, and I'm going to Baylor Scott and White, who would you recommend that I see there?
Exactly, and it's not a referral; it's a recommendation. And they understand money and these sorts of decisions.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So and doctors understand these changes and know that there's going to be this disruption in the system. They prefer not disruption, but I know that they know it's coming. My favorite options. Are you there, Eric?
Oh, I'm sorry. I had myself on mute.
Oh, that's not good. But these are my favorite options, actually. However, it's not the group health insurance one at the end is not the cheapest, but it's almost everybody I talked to, many people did individual policies because it was cheaper to write an individual policy than be a dependent on your spouse's plan. I'm going to tell you we're going to find that that's not the case going forward. We're finding COBRA, for example, is cheaper than the individual plans and going to even be more so in 2016. So when that open enrollment comes, or that if it's a qualifying event for 1/1/2016, for you that's not true for all plans, but some plans will allow you to move there 1/1/2016. That is certainly something you should check into. That's something we can't find out for you, but you can find out for yourself, or should be a piece of the decision process. Is this the best option for me now? I've done a couple of people on a group health insurance and looked at the rates versus where they are now, and moved them, if I moved them to a comparable plan, doing like a small group with Blue. And I ran a group, and most of these people that I looked at were in their 50s. And the increase would be less if people were younger, but the group plan would, for the comparable benefits, would run about 25% higher than what they're paying this year.
Wow.
Yeah, it's not cheap.
It's interesting, that and it is fortunate for people that do have multiple different options. Sometimes people have, do have an option to go on to a spouse's plan, but you may have to wait until their open enrollment period unless you had some sort of qualifying event, you have a baby, you get married, that sort of thing. But you may have to wait until their open enrollment period. Same thing, if maybe you waived coverage on your employer-sponsored plan and you purchased an individual plan, but there is still a plan available to you. Even if you can't join January 1st, at whatever time your open enrollment period is, you could certainly drop your individual plan at that time and go into the group plan if that makes more sense to you. So what Susan was saying is, that it made sense over the last couple of years for people to choose individual rather than group insurance because individual was less expensive, and we're starting to see that flip-flop. And so something that was good advice in the past isn't necessarily good advice this year. And so it's just kind of the nature of this law. So with all of that said, I think it's worth saying, thank you very much for being patient. Patience is a virtue. So thank you for that. The insurance companies, they're not giving us a lot of information or rates ahead of time. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, they're the ones that have to approve these plans that the insurance companies file, and they've been a little bit slow in doing that, been delayed in doing that. The rates haven't been available through healthcare.gov, and so and even the ones that are only the marketplace rates where most of our business is outside. And so so thank you for your continued patience. You're definitely in good hands here, and we'll make sure you're getting taken care of. But with that, I'd kind of like to just open it up to any questions if you have any. I know that we did have a credit a question that came up earlier that said somebody was asking, in order to get a premium tax credit, do you have to purchase coverage directly through the marketplace, or can you go through JME? Absolutely, you can go through JME. So when we say you purchase coverage through the marketplace or off exchange through the carrier, we don't mean that you need to go do this yourself. That's exactly what JME does for you. It's just kind of the behind the scenes stuff that we have to do on our end. So yes, absolutely.
And let me elaborate a little bit on that. Like if we determine ahead of time that Baylor Scott, I'm just going to make up that Baylor Scott & White's the best match for somebody, their system effective 11/1, we can go there, select the plan, and it will do the handshake with healthcare.gov and actually be quicker to get the tax credit than going to healthcare.gov direct and then purchasing it there. Blue's going to have that. Blue's always had that. UHC has that. Humana has that. They all have where they do the handshake direct. It's what's called the direct enrollment method. So you basically, it's like buying it off exchange, except it will just send you to a little side piece and ask questions to answer the questions so that healthcare can provide the premium tax credit amount.
Got it. Thank you. Susan, there are a couple of other questions here. I think I can handle a couple, but let me. But I know that you'll need to chime in on a couple of these. One, somebody asked what qualifies you for a tax credit. So basically, a tax credit, the premium tax credit, it's available to assist people with the cost of individual coverage. In order to qualify for it, you cannot be eligible for other what's called minimum essential coverage. So essentially, a government plan like Medicare or Medicaid, you can't be eligible for that. You also can't be eligible for an employer plan where the cost just to cover the employee would be less than 9.5% of your household income. So essentially, any employer plan that's available to you would block most people from getting a subsidy. Aside from that, if you're not disqualified, then it's available to you if you earn up to 400% of the federal poverty level. That varies by individual, and varies by family size, basically what your income could be. But there is, if you would like some information on it, if you go to the JME website and click on the individual tab, scroll down to the bottom, there's some articles, and one of those it actually has the federal poverty levels for 2015, so you can kind of see what the income cutoffs are for that. Another person asked, can we explain grandfathered plans? A grandfathered plan is one that was in place back when this law was signed, March 23rd of 2010, where you kind of renewed your plan year after year after year. And what it does is it helps you to avoid some of the new rules. So some of the new rating rules, the way the insurance companies price their plans, as well as some of the covered benefits. So there's a lot of advantages to the new plans, like individual plans now. You can't be declined based on medical conditions. They can't, say we're not going to cover a particular condition. They cover maternity and mental health and that sort of thing, where a grandfathered plan wouldn't cover those sorts of things. But the advantages to a grandfather plan is sometimes the premiums are lower, and you may not be affected by some of these changes we've talked about. And then, all right, and so Susan, why don't we do just a couple of more questions here, and then I do think we should, certainly continue to follow up. If anybody else has other questions, we'll tell you how to ask those. But one person did ask here, and Susan, maybe you can confirm for me, but the question is, wouldn't the loss of a Blue Cross PPO count as loss of coverage for someone to go on to an employer-sponsored plan?
Yes, well, the answer is yes, sometimes. And I'm going to give you an example. A lot of large self-funded plans do not want to do administration throughout the year. One of these examples is the TRS, the teacher system that we have here in Texas. They do their open enrollment September 1st of every year. We even checked with them, and they will not consider it a special enrollment event. Now, if the group is on a fully insured plan, small or large, they should take it as a special enrollment event. It's these large self-insured plans may not. You could try it, but I know TRS is aware of it, and they have already said no, they won't. They consider only the birth of a baby or somebody. So it's one reason why I try to get out the logic statements in August, so that people that had TRS as an option with their spouse could get on it. And I know several people did that. They thought it was expensive, but that way they still had their PPO and their providers. I would tell you a lot of them will, but there's some of them that won't if they're a large self-insured. They do not have to, because they don't have to abide by certain rules.
There you go.
But go ahead and ask them and say, hey, I've got this coming up. And if they say yes, that's definitely where I would look at moving myself.
Exactly. Yeah, there's no harm in asking. All they can do is tell you no. So, and Susan, I'm gonna let you answer this. I know the answer to it, but I'll let you say it in your own words. The question is, so we can contact JME directly to figure out what the best plan is for us to pursue.
That's correct. And any of us here, the thing is we get on the phones and things, any of us can answer the questions, get information. I know sometimes people like to work with a certain agent because they know them better. That's fine. They can even set up an appointment or email the particular agent that they would like to work with and set up a time either on the phone to talk through things. Because I feel like that's probably what we're going to have to do a lot of starting November 1st, to allocate time and make sure we get to talk and take care of everyone. I mean, that's our goal. Our goal with this was to give everybody just the idea of the things that we need to know so that we can help get them on the right plan for them. There's not one size fits all here.
Exactly.
And there's no reason to, the other thing I want to add, there's no reason to go to health insurance marketplace unless you get a tax credit.
And even then, they're still going to work through JME. It takes a lot of extra
time, and then a lot of the plans aren't even offered there. So, but however, if you've had a tax credit in the past, there should be some communication coming out from healthcare.gov about that. They'll keep your tax credit the same unless you go online to healthcare.gov and change the, like change your income or something to change the amount of the tax credit. And it's all a matter of a formula. So that's important to watch for any communication you get from healthcare.gov if you have had a credit in the past.
Very good. Now, I'll tell you what, why don't we tackle one last question here, and then I know that there are still a few others, and we will email you directly with a response to any that we don't get to here. But Susan, last question for the webinar here is the Baylor Scott and White PPO network. Do they have an HSA approved plan in it?
Yes, they do. They have two. Yes, they do. I'm very happy with that. In fact, I like it because they have one that's, I think it's 3,000 and another one that's the higher 6,000.
Great. So it gives you some options.
It gives us some options, yes.
Perfect. Well, everybody, thank you so much. We do appreciate it. We actually, most of the people that signed on stayed on until the end, so hopefully that's a sign that this was at least somewhat beneficial to you. I know you have more questions. If you do have other questions, Susan, should they just send it to the main email address, JME?
Send it to the main email address or to any of the agents. The main email address is jme@jmeinsurance.com.
Perfect. So you can do that, or you can send it directly to whoever your contact is at JME.
Exactly.
Thank you very much. Everybody have a great day.
Goodbye.